You have introduced not hatred and vitriol, you've introduced indifference and mockery to the fan base. And so now the people that show up are just there to laugh at it and to make content. And in the cases of, what Richard would decry as the birthday party clowns, the people that actually comment on these things and give their takes on it and give their reviews, they make more money off of Star Wars than Disney does.
The Acolyte is the story that will not go away. It came out. It wasn't very good. Everyone laughed about it. They had a good time with it. We knew we were never going to get a season 2. People claimed that they were crying that it happened. And now we're a few weeks away from that. We should be moving on to something else, but we can't get away from the Acolyte because the star of the program, Amandla Stenberg, went like 10 minutes on Instagram video or something like that, airing her grievances. Apparently she blames the alt-right for that. Don't we all blame the alt-right for everything, Aaron?
Yeah, Amandla Stenberg is the Rachel Zegler of Star Wars. She just can't stop coming out and shooting projects in the foot. Releasing her diss track was a very poor idea. It did not help the show at all. And this entitled little half-Danish rich girl coming out, this child of privilege, as they like to say. She has been in film since she was a young girl. She knows nothing about any of the things she talked about in her diss track. The idea that she has ever known oppression is absolutely ridiculous. Coming out to lecture us and talk about the alt-right. She's just another dumb Hollywood celebrity coming out and talking about things that she has no idea about, just spouting off a lot of received opinions. She has no critical thinking skills. She has no idea what she's saying. She's just spouting the party line. But that's what they do. That's what actors do. They show up and they read their lines. And so that's what she's doing. She's reading the approved lines.
I think she's milking her 15 minutes of fame because this was probably her one chance and it didn't go well.
I mean, she'll probably get a couple of other small projects before fading away. I mean, if the... and I blame a lot of it on the direction a lot of the times with these projects because, you see good actors and then they have terrible performances in bad projects. And you're like, oh, man, I know Natalie Portman can give a good performance, but in episode 1, oof, because when your only direction is faster, more intense, that's kind of hard to work with. So I try to give a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. But if her range of acting from the Acolyte is any indication of her talent level, I don't expect that she's going to have a very long career, especially when she keeps coming out, making herself a liability to the projects that she's involved with.
Let's talk about that. Amandla Stenberg finally reacts to the cancellation of her Star Wars series, The Acolyte, in a 10-minute video posted on her Instagram story. The 25-year-old actress blames fans, conservatives, the alt-right, and insinuates Trump is to blame for the series cancellation. Stenberg says she wasn't surprised by the news of the cancellation because of all the vitriol surrounding the show from a certain segment of the fandom. She's 25 years old. She's not a kid. It's been proven out there. There are plenty of examples that blaming the fans never actually works. If you want your show to go on despite it being canceled, there are ways to do that. Unfortunately, that was never really going to work with The Acolyte. It's not a Firefly where you're going to get a movie. It's not like a Star Trek where you're going to get a movie or a Family Guy where it comes back after a few seasons off.
Firefly, baby.
Oh.
Fruity Odie bar. Not mandatory. No, you're absolutely right. And here's the problem with her argument. It doesn't matter how much of vitriol is directed against your show by a segment of the population, even if that were true, which it's not, because the people that, the wide range of people that thought The Acolyte sucked is numerous. It crosses every boundary. Anybody who loves good story knows that that show sucked. The problem is your argument fails because not enough people watched and liked the show or were interested in it to keep it alive. It was a $180 million train wreck. Star Wars is in such a bad state that The Acolyte, even if it had been good, had no chance. And it wasn't good. Andor is good, apparently. You're enjoying Andor. People are telling me that Andor is really good. And by the way, if everybody hates diversity so much, if the Star Wars fan base is so alt-right, if they're so conservative and they hate diversity, why was Rogue One a success? Why is Rogue One held up by these same fans as the one triumph of the Disney Star Wars movies, the one thing that they really enjoyed? That had a very diverse cast, and nobody cared because the cast was good, the story was engaging, and people liked the characters. So maybe if you hadn't hired Harvey Weinstein's personal assistant for political reasons, if you hadn't let her show make it all about her and her relationship with her sister and some sort of like weak political screed, if you hadn't introduced a lot of stupid concepts like focusing on space witches, which nobody is interested in unless they're the witches of Dathomir, which Dave Filoni has also ruined, maybe your show would have had a little bit of a chance to find an audience. But unfortunately, it doesn't, because you went down the Willow path and you effed around and you found out.
Stenberg stated, pointing the blame at those she believes were behind the negative reaction. Stenberg pointed to a rampage of, I would say, hyper-conservative bigotry and vitriol, prejudice, hatred, and hateful language towards us, she confessed, reflecting on the emotional toll of her perceived backlash. This really affected me when I first got the job because it's not something, even though I anticipated it happening, it's not something you can fully understand what it feels like until it's happening to you. And I fully believe that. I fully believe that when you are the star of a show that sucks as bad as The Acolyte, and that definitely got as negative of a reaction as The Acolyte got, it would definitely suck being in the crosshairs and having people talk about your performance and the caliber of the show and the fact that you didn't do anything to make it better. You might have made it worse. But the idea that these are all just hyper conservatives. Well, when we just talk about conservatives, you're talking about a minority of the population. When you talk about hyper conservatives, I'm assuming that means the most ultra conservative people out there. You're talking about an even more minority portion of the population. If only hyper conservatives didn't like The Acolyte, it would have been a success. If all the other Star Wars fans that didn't identify as conservative or even ultra conservative decided to check it out and said, you know what, this is pretty damn good, it still would have been successful, because that's a lot of fucking people. You actually just turned everybody off. But for some reason, we're all trained to just say, oh, it was bigots, it was alt-right Nazis, instead of actually reflecting and realizing why the show wasn't very good. Because it wasn't good Star Wars, because it broke the canon of Star Wars. It didn't follow along in the vision of what George Lucas had created and made it the most successful, popular franchise in the history of entertainment.
As my friend Daphne said, who, by the way, is a woman and is not white, she said that it was not only the worst Star Wars show she'd ever seen, but one of the worst shows she'd ever watched. She's not hyper conservative. She's not a white male. But these people always get dismissed. It's amazing because I've said it before, and I think even Neon has echoed it. It's Schrodinger's fan base. We're a vocal minority that doesn't like current Star Wars, and yet when we don't show up, we can tank an entire project. So which is it? Is the fan base conservative and is rejecting these things and is destroying these projects? Well, then I'll tell you what you better do as an entertainment company. You better start making stuff for the audience you have instead of chasing an audience that you don't have, that doesn't exist or that doesn't show up. One of the two. It's one of the two. Are we a vocal minority, or do we have all this power? When you've turned the fan base off, when you've introduced apathy, when you're normies that aren't even involved in this whole culture war thing, when they just say to themselves, wow, Star Wars is really bad now, and they lose interest in it, you're not getting them back. It's a long road to get that back. You have introduced not hatred and vitriol, you've introduced indifference and mockery to the fan base. And so now the people that show up are just there to laugh at it and to make content. And in the cases of, what Richard would decry as the birthday party clowns, the people that actually comment on these things and give their takes on it and give their reviews, they make more money off of Star Wars than Disney does. Disney lost money on The Acolyte.
It's pretty wild that people have actually been trained to just go out there and blame people without any actual evidence that they're the ones doing it, and just treating every type of criticism as bigotry on itself, because no one could ever say that the performance wasn't good or the show wasn't up to snuff or didn't include Star Wars because it was starring a female person of color.
When Kathleen Kennedy knows that they're about to drop a deuce, she makes sure that they cast a person of color in one of the lead roles so that they can claim that the show didn't work because of bigotry. Well, if the show didn't work because of bigotry, then maybe you need to return to casting that will make your project successful. Or you can just convince yourself that, we're going to fight against the bigots, and you can continue to lose your parent company money. But if this were a company that didn't have a larger parent company protecting them under its umbrella, they would be out of business. You could not endure this many flops in a row. Kathleen Kennedy has proven herself to be the most incompetent studio head in history. She was handed the golden goose, the brand of brands, a license to print money, and she destroyed it within a decade.
That is absolutely exceptional. Let's talk about how this happened. The Acolyte was canceled by Disney, likely due to poor viewership. The official Nielsen viewership ratings, which are attached to Disney Plus accounts, revealed The Acolyte to be the least watched Star Wars show on Disney Plus. Many episodes didn't even register on the Nielsen charts, and the season finale is also the least watched season finale for a Star Wars show on Disney Plus. And I believe it's the most expensive, or amongst the most expensive. $180 million that they basically flushed down the toilet to put money in the pocket of some really great guys out there. And I appreciate that, because I think they deserve it and they have good commentary out there, but they embarrassed themselves. Amandla Stenberg and Kathleen Kennedy and Leslie Headland and everybody out there that are defending this, including the lady that said she broke down in tears because she had never seen herself represented in Star Wars and it meant so much to her. You need to realize it didn't get canceled because of bigots. It got canceled because nobody watched it and it wasn't popular.
The things that you want out of entertainment, if you're the person who said, like, I broke down because I finally saw myself on screen, you know, like, if you're that person, if you're that narcissist that needs to see themselves on screen, you need to understand you are not interesting enough to carry a show that costs $180 million. You need to be in a show that costs $1 million. That needs to be you on screen, because then maybe it can find enough of an audience to make a profit and to be sustainable and to get more seasons. There's not enough of you and your weird fetishes and the things that you want to see on screen to support a $180 million production. So it's all within the scale of expectation. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be shows made for you. Get out there and make shows made for you, but understand the size of your audience and what the budget needs to be for it to be successful and for it to find enough of an audience. This is all, we talk about this in comics all the time. I'm fine with there being comics for everybody, different kinds of comics. You want to do a lesbian bicycling anthology? Go for it, man. Follow your dream, follow your passion. I'm sure that there's some people out there that would love to read that and they would see themselves in it. But you've got to understand how much money you can reasonably expect to make playing to that niche audience. When you have a huge budget like $180 million, you need to make the most mainstream, broad appeal thing possible. Disney needed this to be a huge hit. If they had put this out in theaters, they would need this to break $600 million. But they put it on Disney Plus, which was also a huge mistake.
Should have put it on Netflix. Let them pay the license for it.
Yep, and we've talked about
this.
Although
they may have said no.
Yeah, they might have. They might have said, "Oh, Star Wars, no."
Although they paid for cuties, didn't they?
They paid for cuties, and they gave Zack Snyder a bunch of money to make Rebel Moon, which, by the way, was more interesting than the Acolyte. And you know how much I hated Rebel Moon. The only thing that we got invested with the Acolyte was things that we were familiar with. We were like, "Oh, a lightsaber fight, neat. Oh, a Wookiee, cool." You know, it's just member berries at this point. It's putting things on the screen that we recognize and expecting us to clap. But that's not enough. It's not enough because all of those things need to be in service of a story that we care about and characters that we're invested in. And that's why Rogue One worked. Like, those characters weren't the most deep, but they had enough that you could attach to at least a few of them. You know, everybody loved Chirrut. Everybody loved Chirrut's buddy, whose name escapes me right now. You know, they liked that friendship. They were invested in it. The droid was great. I liked Bodhi Rook a lot, the pilot, that, like, he's just trying to do the right thing, this Imperial pilot that defects. I didn't understand why he had a ponytail. I don't feel like the Empire would allow that. But, you know, if he's supposed to pass for a smuggler, things like that, maybe there's some wiggle room there. But, I mean, I was invested in his story. This poor guy, he's just trying to do the right thing. And what happens? Some crazy guy assaults him with an octopus.
Look at the telepathic slug.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she did say something. It was a 10-minute Instagram video. And she did say something that I definitely can't agree with.
At least she didn't twerk in it. That was bad.
She did not twerk. But I could definitely agree with this. Amandla Stenberg also thanked fans that did like the show for the support and said that, I just want to let those people know out there who supported us in that way and supported us vocally despite and in the face of all the vitriol that we received and the kind of targeted attack I would say received by the alt-right. Just about you were deeply loved, appreciated, and it made the job all worthwhile to me. So the part in the middle, which is really stupid and the alt-right stuff, but going out there and thanking the people that supported the show and appreciating that, I think was probably the only way to go on this one. Throwing all the other stuff in there just makes you look stupid. It does suck, Aaron, when you genuinely like something and you feel like it's good and no one else likes it. I remember when Firefly got canceled. I know a lot of people were upset with a lot of their favorite shows being canceled. And it does suck, but you can't cry about it. It's not like that fucking bad. It's not your family member died, your dog didn't die. It's just a show didn't make it. But it is nice that she did go out there and try to thank them while also throwing some people under the bus that probably didn't deserve it.
And nobody blamed Firefly getting canceled for Gina Torres being in a lead role. Nobody was like, well, it had a diverse woman of color and, you know, she was a badass. And everybody loved Gina Torres.
Alan Tudyk's a fucking cuck, man. Goddamn soy boy. You got nothing in that show. That's why they canceled it.
No, it was a great show.
It was good.
I liked every single member of that cast. Every single member
even
was
the
great.
doctor?
And even the doctor. Like I mean, he wasn't my favorite. But like I liked him. I liked his protectiveness of his sister. You know, I liked the budding romance between him and Kaylee. Like that kind of like little bit of tension where, you know, he was all like, you know, like I can't be involved in anything except looking out for my sister, and she's like carrying a torch for him. I like that kind of stuff. Firefly was a great show, and it was canceled not because of bigots, not because of, you know, just like the Acolyte wasn't canceled because of bigots. It was canceled because the studio the network didn't know what to do with it and kept moving it around. I never knew when it was on. And they showed it out of order. It was an episodic TV show that they mixed up the order on so that it didn't make any sense. So it never had a chance to find an audience. The Acolyte had a chance to find an audience. They spent a lot of money on promotion. You know, unfortunately, they put it on a failing streaming service that is never going to be successful. And you can take that to the bank. You can quote me on that. And if I'm ever wrong, I will gladly eat crow, but I'm not going to be wrong. Because you and I have said from the beginning, streaming in the way that they want to do it, with every company breaking up and doing their own streaming service, is not sustainable. We've said that from the beginning. It's proving true. You're seeing all these consolidations and all these, you know, studios lose money because they keep chasing that chimera. It does not work. So until you go back to a model where everything's on Netflix and you just sell it to them and people have a one-stop shop that they can go to, you're never going to find the success that you want in streaming. You know, you abandoned the digital market, or the market of, you know, putting things out on physical media. You abandoned that. That was a huge amount of money that you left on the table. And it's gone now. I don't know if it can come back. You sell things to yourself, to your own services, you know, so you're basically just moving money from your right pocket to your left pocket and saying we made a profit. It's not the way it works. This is all a terrible, terrible model. Star Wars has been murdered by Kathleen Kennedy. I think that it needs to go dormant for at least a decade before they do anything else with it. If they have any hope of ever salvaging it, they need to abandon the sequels. As long as the sequels are where the Star Wars story is going, as long as that exists as part of the overall Star Wars story, you're never going to be successful with any of these projects that you do that are set before that time frame, because we know where we end up. You know, you've killed the golden goose. The Acolyte sucked. It wasn't because of racists. And Amandla Stenberg, you're an idiot, because if you had come out and you had been cool, you had been an Amandla, people didn't like the Miss Marvel show. You know, people didn't watch it. They didn't turn up. But you know what? Everybody loves Amandla because they feel like she's one of us. She's a nerd. She's out there correcting Kevin Feige on like, this isn't the 616 universe. What are you talking about? That's the comic universe. You know, she actually cares about the character. She cares about the properties. She cares about what she's involved in. And it wasn't about her. It was about putting those things on the screen. And that's why everybody loves her, because she didn't come out and vilify the fans. So even people who are like, man, I didn't like that Miss Marvel show and the Marvels sucked, but Amandla was a bright point, and I like her, and I wish her success in her future endeavors. I hope she goes on to do great things, because she just seems like such a sweetheart. You could have been in that pocket.
If you would like more of these types of conversations, this is just a part of the Geek Fix podcast on Think Critical Patreon. One of the awesome bennies you get on Think Critical Patreon when you support us in our mission here on Think Critical YouTube. There's a link to that in the video description.